Hello and welcome to another process video. This time I'm making a card instead of a scrapbooking layout. And so at this point, I'm not entirely sure what I want to do. I just know that I want to make a scene because I've been watching a bunch of videos on the Lawn Fawn YouTube channel, and I really love how they use the die cuts and all the stamps all together and make a beautiful scene. And so I started by looking through my stamps, and I picked out a couple of stamp sets that would make a nice scene. And then I'm going through my dies, and I took out some rectangle dies, and then I also took out a bunch of border dies and dies that create parts of background scenes. And so I went and put all those in a pile. Now, part of my problem is that I'm starting with way too many options, and so I think the next time I make a card, I'm going to start quite a bit smaller. So I was thinking about making my card all fit on one of those rectangles, but then I decided that I actually wanted to make a square card this is my card blank that I made. And it was actually, that card blank was in some stash that I inherited from somebody, and it ends up it's not a standard size. So I thought I'm not going to make a non-standard sized card. For this particular one, I want to use an envelope that I already have. So I have some A2 envelopes and I have some square envelopes. And so I've decided to make this card be square, just for something a little bit different. So this square card blank is 5¼ by 5¼ and I made a bunch of these card blanks specifically to go with some Stampin' Up! Envelopes that are that size. And really what I really want to use in this card is that mountain range die. And so I'm not sure which of the two mountain ranges I'm going to use. One has a whole bunch of small peaks, and then the other has a few large peaks. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut them both out because I can't decide which one I want. And I'm using my magnetic platform, and I'm just nesting them in so that I'm not entirely sure at this point how much of the mountains I'm going to want to have showing. So I want to have a fair amount of mountain underneath of the tips, just so that I definitely have enough to show when I go to make my my card. So I just have a little valet tray that I'm going to put all my little die cut pieces in, and I'm going to cut another set of the snow caps. I'm actually going to cut a total of 3 sets of the snow caps, and I've decided to do some what are those called? Clouds. Some clouds as well. And these are just all from my scrap drawers. I have a white scrap drawer that I'm picking, and white and neutrals that I picked the gray and whites from. And then that yellow is going to be the only pattern paper that will be on the page on the card, and that I'm cutting the sun with. And that also came from my scraps. And so I'm taking all those other snow caps, and I'll also take the clouds, which I'm actually not going to use this time, but who knew? Like I said, I'm kind of designing this as I go, so I'm not entirely sure what exactly I'm going to need, which is not the most efficient way to make a card, which is why it took 2 hours to make one card. I could have easily made a layout in that amount of time. But I'm trying to get better at cards, so this is me making a card. This is this other cloud die that I just sent through along with the 3rd set of mountain snow caps. That is a frame of clouds, and it's the exact same shape of clouds that I already cut. It's just the frame version, and I think I might want that one, so I ran that through. Just a tip is that you can actually leave that one connected, the two that are nested, because it just cuts frames, unless if you wanted to use the insides of the frames as well as the frame. Like you could use the negative space of that one as well. So I still haven't used my hillside borders, my hillside dies yet. So I'm going to use those. Those are stitched hillsides, and one of them coordinates with this little row of trees. I have used the trees before. I just haven't used them with their hillside yet. So I'm going to just use my little jewelry snips to snip those apart. And I'm going to cut a couple of different hillsides because this card was inspired by a trip we took yesterday throughout rural Nova Scotia. We went to the Bay of Fundy to check out the tides, which are the highest tides in the world. And this is just random papers from my green scrap drawer. And here again, I'm not entirely sure how deep I'm going to need these layers to be. So I actually made a mistake here. I should have cut that green so that it had like the green with the grass on it, so that it was a little bit wider than it is, or a little bit longer than it is. But anyhow, it is what it is. And I'll go back and cut another grass because of it a little bit later. So now I really want a stitched border along the edge of where those trees are. So I'm thinking I'm going to want to cut another stitched border out of that exact same shade of green. So I'm just going to cut into the piece that I already have, and I'll just run that through as well. Now those stitched borders, you do have to be careful when you use them, because I think I cut one of them, this one, I'm going to cut the wrong size by accident, because it has only one side has the stitched edge on it, of course, right? So in this case, my stitch edge is the little tiny sliver of that yellowish green cardstock. So as I was saying, this whole card is inspired by the trip that we took to rural Nova Scotia. And one of the things that kind of struck me as we were on the car drive over was just how beautiful at this time of year all of the fields look, because they're all different shades of green as they kind of the hills kind of roll into one another in the background as you're driving along. And I just thought that was really quite beautiful. And so I wanted to use a whole bunch of different shades of green on this card. And there are no mountains in Nova Scotia, so that part was entirely from my imagination, but I just really wanted to use that mountain die set because I just got it last week. So here I am. This is the fun part. This is where you get to start putting together these pieces to make a little scene. And this, I had no idea how much fun this really would be. I actually really, really love this. It's quite a rewarding way to make a card. And so now it's occurring to me that maybe I don't have to choose between those two mountain ranges. Maybe I can layer the two of them like that. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm hoping I have enough snow caps here. And I thought, yeah, I'm missing one. There should be enough, because two of them are going to just kind of go off of the side of the card, or one of them is going to go off the side of the card. I apologize. I am coming down with a bit of a cold, but I decided to make a video anyways. So I want the second rolling hill to not cover up any of the trees. So the idea is that the trees are going to mark where the rolling hills meet the mountains. And then I'll have some rolling hills, and then I'll have some grass in the foreground. So the grass will be the part that is the closest to the viewer of the card. And that's why it is in a straight line instead of a rolling hill. At least in my mind, that's kind of justifies the fact that I don't have the rolling hill grass dies. So I'm trying to work with the paper that I have here in my stash. That's one of the problems with working with scraps, is that if you need more, you probably don't have more of that particular color. So I would rather have that grass die cut piece extend all the way to cover the whole bottom of the card. And I really don't want to spread out the other layers anymore. So I'm trying to decide what else I can do here. So I went over to my scrap drawer, that's where I'm at right now, looking for some more pieces of green paper that's exactly the same color, but I couldn't find any. So I found this olive paper, this more olivey colored paper. It's got a little bit more yellow in it. And I think it's olive from Old Olive from Stampin' Up. And so I'm going to cut a whole other piece of the grass. So there will be 2 layers of grass, or maybe I'll replace them. At this point, I don't know exactly which strategy I'm going to use. But while I'm at it, I decided to go ahead and decide which of the farm animals I'm going to use. And with this elaborate background, I kind of thought I really only want one farm animal. I don't want too much going on. There's already a lot of interest in the background of this card. So I thought I would stamp a little sheep. I love this sheep as much as I love all the other animals on this stamp set. I just love the sheep so much. And then I had a second thought and decided I think a little tiny mouse would look cute, kind of maybe peeking out somewhere or hiding somewhere. So I thought I would go ahead and stamp off the mouse as well while I was at it. And then there was a little bit of a fiber from the last time I cleaned the mouse. There was a little fiber stuck to his tail, so that stamped a little imperfectly. I'm using my mini Misty for that, my Misty tool. And I love that for stamping little stamps because it's much more, it's just really convenient and easy to use because it's so tiny. So now I'm thinking, what am I going to do with this sheep? I don't have, you see my sample there is all of the Copic markers that I own. I don't have an extensive color collection. And so I'm a little bit stuck with what I have, which I guess is the case for most people. So what I have pulled out here is C3, C5, and C7, as well as my colorless blender, which is 0. And so I'm just going around the outside of the sheep's wool with C3, which is the lightest shade of gray that I own. And then I'm coloring it in really messy, in like messy circles, kind of because I think that that's the way that wool would go. And then I'm going back with my colorless blender and just moving that ink that I already put on the sheep's wool, just moving it around a little bit. And now I'm coming back with, again, the C3 and just adding a bit of color around the places that I want to have dark. So basically around the outside of the sheep's wool and then around his ear and underneath of his ear a little bit where I think a shadow might go. I'm not really experienced in using my Copics. I've been using them for several years, but I use them so infrequently. So now I'm going to take the other 2 shades of gray. Actually, I think first I'm going to put just the C3 on the lightest parts, and then I'm going back with the C5 here, and then I'm blending it into the C3 with the C3. And at this point, I haven't used the C7 at all. I wasn't sure if I was going to use it, but then I thought, no, I'm going to use it. So now I'm adding the C7 right to kind of like the very top of everything. So the top of his head and the top of each of his legs. And then I'm blending it down with the C5, and then I won't bother adding any C3 there because I basically want his fur, where his wool has been, it doesn't grow. I want his skin to look black. If I use just black, it would not have any detail, like you wouldn't be able to see his little eyes and his little nose. So even though I want him to appear black, I'm using that really dark shade of gray, which is C7. That's just the darkest that I have. So I had to work with what I have. And I ended up only just the very tips of one of his hooves, and his nose end up still being the C3. So now I have 2 shades of brown here for the mouse, E25 and E27. Again, I don't have much to work with, so I just colored them all in 25, and then I went back and added some shadows in 27, and now I'm just using little swirly motions to blend this out with the E25, and I don't know, you can't really see it all that well. I came back with E33 just to add a bit of, it's kind of a bit more of an orangey brown to the center of him, in the hopes that I could just kind of lighten him up a little bit. He was looking maybe a little bit too dark. But anyhow, it is what it is. I'm limited in my colors, so this is what I came up with. Maybe I'll buy some more colors now that I'm making more cards. I don't know. So I'm going to run this through my die cut machine at the same time as the new piece of grass that I'm going to replace the other piece of grass with. And even though I'm using my magnetic platform, I'm still using a bit of Post-it tape to hold things down because of the curve in my cutting plates. Sometimes the little dies don't stay in place, even though it is magnetic. So now I'm trying to keep everything together so I don't lose any dies. I do put the number of dies on the back of each of the packages that I have, just so that I know if I lose one, I know to keep looking for it. So I just double checked the measurements there of my card base, which is 5 1/4 by 5 1/4. And I just went to my stash to find a piece of Pool Party Stampin' Up! Cardstock. I knew I wanted this to be my sky. I was inspired by that piece of polka dotted paper way up at the top there. That came with my mountain range dies and the other things that I bought from Lawn Fawn. They always send you a couple of little scraps. I didn't want to use a polka dotted sky because I'm using the polka dotted sun, but I was inspired by the color of that paper, so I decided to use Pool Party, which is my very favorite color of Stampin' Up! Paper and ink, and I think it's retired now, so I only have what I have left of it, but I thought I'd use a piece for the background of this card. So now I'm using this glue from 3L, and I'm actually going to stop using it because it's too liquidy and it's just smudging around too much. And making it has the potential, it hasn't made a mess yet, but it has the potential to make some mess. So I think I'm only going to use it on the largest of the mountain caps, and then I'm going to go back to using my Zig 2-way glue pen. And that's just a really nice way to control the flow of the glue, is to use a glue pen. It's just it dispenses such a teeny amount of glue at a time that it's very easy to work with. So I'm going to layer those 2 mountain ranges like that, and then layer the tree line in front of it. And while I'm at it, I'll just add the stitched border to the edge of the tree line. It's not really another layer as much as it is just to add the stitched line to the edge where the tree line is. And then there's another stitched hill, and then there's my grass. And I thought maybe my sheep could be frolicking in the mountaintops. The whole time I was doing this, I was thinking of The Sound of Music, that opening scene. And then it suddenly occurred to me that maybe I'll just use both of those pieces of grass, just because I like how using the green that's on the top at the very bottom right now, it brings in the green that's in the background and repeats it a little bit. So it's not necessarily, instead of having all different shades of green, it repeats one of the shades of green, which I really like. So I am still playing around a little bit with the mountain range to decide how exactly I'm going to line these 2 up. I think I could have overlapped them even more than I ended up overlapping them. Like, I could have moved that front mountain range up a little bit more, but it would have taken up less space vertically in my design if I did it that way. But I do like it the way it turned out. Now I'm just attaching the sun to the mountain that I want it to hide behind, just so that it's in place. And now what I'm not realizing here is that, it didn't, when the card was finished, it looked like I didn't adhere that layer at all. So maybe I needed to adhere it a little bit more. I'm using again my glue pen to stick that little frame of a cloud on, and overlapping the mountain ranges like this. I decided to use the outline cloud because there's just too much with the snow caps. I didn't want the cloud to kind of, I don't know, it felt like it was going to be too much of that same white. So using the outline of the cloud just works a little bit better. It gives more balance to how things look up there in the sky. And now I originally thought when I picked green cardstock for this forest line, like for the tree line, I was originally going to ink those trees. But again, I think I'm erring on the side of being more simple with this one. There's a lot of layers going on. And so I think just leaving them the single shade instead of doing any kind of inking, because inking introduces variations and a bit of a mottled look. And I just felt like I wanted to have that nice solid look that you get with cardstock. That's like not inked cardstock, just regular cardstock. So now, because none of these layers, ideally, if I had full pieces of paper, I would have made each of these layers so that it started off as a square, and then I could have cut these pieces from it. But because they're all different lengths, I have to use pop dots in a funny way that you just saw me do there, just so that everything lines up and is the proper depth. And now I'll put this final little strip of grass. Again, I'm sort of wishing that I had a longer piece of grass there instead of such a skinny piece, but I'm going to put it along the bottom because it's all I have. And then I'm thinking I need something else on this page. There's as much as I was inspired by all the different shades of green, and there's lots of green on this, I feel like I need to cover up some of the green. So my first idea was that maybe I could put a little fence that runs along, and Lawn Fawn actually makes a fence border that I wish I had, but I don't have it. So I'm going to stamp 4 of these white picket fences or I guess picket fences that you can color any color, that come with the farm stamp set. That stamp set is called Critters on the Farm, and it is an older stamp set from Lawn Fawn. You can still buy it though, so it's one of my favorites. It's kind of like a classic Lawn Fawn stamp set. I really like it. So you saw me just use my mini Misty tool to stamp out those 4 pieces of white picket fence. It's white for now. I'm going to color it eventually. And at this point, I'm thinking I'll run 4 of these little segments of fence all the way across the foreground of my card. And so rather than pull out my giant Big Shot, it's not that giant, but my full-size die cut machine, which is my Big Shot that you saw me using earlier, I decided to use my Cuddle Kids just because at this point I've got a whole lot of stuff all over my desk, and the idea of clearing it all off just didn't appeal to me, so I just grabbed my Cuddle Kit. That's part of why I have it, is to use it in these kinds of situations. And so there we go. Oh no, see how bad that looks? It was a good idea, but it just isn't going to work. It's just like, it's a little bit too much. It seems like it's a card all about a fence when I do that. And I really want to make the focus be on the sheep. So then I thought, as perfect as that spot is with that big giant hill, it's a perfect spot for the sheep to be. I've decided now that I'm going to stamp out a barn. I'm going to use my Misty tool again. And the Misty tool is just so easy, especially the mini one. It's so small and so easy to grab and use that now I don't even know if I need blocks anymore. I'm just always going to use this. Although I'll use some blocks a little bit later in this. I still like to use blocks for sentiments, I guess. So now I wish I had a brick red color in Copics, but I don't. But if I was a little bit confused. I couldn't find the colors that I was looking for. I saw them on my color chart, but I could not find them in my box, even though they were looking right at me. Sorry, I guess I should have zoomed out a little bit, but this is just me being confused. You're not really missing anything by not seeing this process. I was a little bit blinded and couldn't find the colors that were right there in front of me. So these are sort of like an orangey red color. I'll tell you which colors I'm using. I'm using R05 and R08. And I'm just going to color the whole barn in R05. I actually don't enjoy the coloring process with Copic markers. I actually was thinking about maybe paper piecing this. I would rather fussy cut than color, to be honest. But I'm warming up to it. I'm liking it a little bit more. So I colored the whole thing in R05, and then I just took R08 and I just put a tiny little bit around where I thought shadows would go. So under the roof and under that window, and then around basically just where there were lines on the image. That's where I kind of added some dimension, I guess. And to me, I mean, that doesn't look all that Copic colored. It's very, very plain and simple. You can barely see that there's even any shadows on it, but I like it. I actually, this card has made me want to do more Copic coloring than any other Copic coloring I've ever done. So I very well might invest in some more markers. If I'm going to enjoy the process a little bit more, then I don't mind investing a bit of money into it. So here I am with some browns. I'll let you know which colors I have. It's E25, E27, and E29. I just colored the doors in E25, and then I'm going back with E27 to basically add a little bit of extra shadow along where the floor is, and then just around the edges of the door. And then I went back with my E25 and blended it all together, just the best that I could. And then I took E29 and I went all the way around the frame of the door, and then I didn't have anything darker than that in Copic, so I took my touch marker in 98, which is just a little bit darker, and I just added a shadow along the bottom part of the frame on either side. I colored that window. I didn't know what to do with the window, so I thought maybe it'll look like it's an open window, or maybe it'll look like it's a wooden shuttered window. But anyhow, you could see like the wood inside of the barn, or I'm not entirely sure. So anyhow, I used E25 and E27 to color that. And now this new color on the roof is E33. And then I just took E25 and I added a shadow on each of the planks, just on one side, well, on two sides, on two adjacent sides of each of the planks that makes up the roof. I just didn't want too much. I didn't want it to look too matchy-matchy. I think if you were building a barn, you might be using all different kinds of wood. So I didn't want the roof to be exactly the same as the door and the window. I went back with E27 just to add a little bit of darker shading around the edges of that trim for the roof. And there's my barn, all done. And I actually quite like that it's not a bright red or even a brick red. I like the orangey red. It's quite nice. And this one fits through on my Cuddle kit as well, so I'm just going to run this through on my little miniature die cut machine. And there we go. And now, this barn looks quite nice right here. That nice big space in the hill provides a nice area for it. One thing that I don't like about this card is that both the barn and the sheep are facing in the exact same direction. I wish that I could turn the sheep around so that he was facing the other way. Also, the mouse is facing the same way. So all three of the main elements on this page, on this card, are all the same. Here I am again with that E33. I'm just going to roughly color in the entire picket fence with this light color, and then I'll go back with the E25 and add some shadows. I'm going to make all of the pieces of wood that are in the back are going to be quite a bit darker, so I'm using the E25 on pretty much all of those pieces. And then I'm coming back with the E25 on these sticks of wood that make up the front. And I'm just putting, again, two adjacent sides. I'm putting a bit of shadow on the bottom and then the right-hand side of each of those little pickets. And then I'm blending it out with the E33. I find that E33 blends really, really well. It moves around on paper really beautifully, much better than some of the other shades. And so it's really easy to mix it with the E27 or the E25. Even though they're quite different colors, they do combine quite nicely. And I think that's because the E33 moves so nicely. So here we go. I'm thinking, what else can I add here? And I was thinking about at this point, I'm thinking about the phrase, and there are a whole bunch of you phrases here, like hello you, thank you, happy birthday to you. And of course I have that little sheep, and you guys know I love puns. So I'm thinking, is there a way that I could play on the you and maybe take the it says I like you on the critters in the farm stamp set, but I don't really like how tiny that sentiment is. So I'm going to start by sticking the mouse in place so I know where he goes, because this phrase is going to go right up to that mouse. And I decided to go with, it says I like you. I'm just taking my little embossing buddy, I think that's called. It's like just a little cushion. It's just a little pocket of powder that you run over something, and it just keeps the embossing ink from sticking to, or the embossing powder from sticking to places you don't want it to stick. So at first I inked the whole thing up with Versamark, but I decided to clear off the word you and mask it off. And then I re-inked it up, and I'm also just taking some ink off of the part of that stamp that's going to overlap with the mouse. So see, it says hello, and I was going to emboss that, and then I thought, wait a minute, I should add the U from the other stamp set, and I'm selectively inking up just the word you. And it's a different font, and it's not exactly perfect, but it's, you know, it's a handmade card. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. And so I got a little bit of extra embossing powder on this one. And so I'm just taking my very fine paintbrush that I keep with my embossing stuff, and I just removed that extra powder. And I like how this looks, even though, you know, the U is not cursive. I could have gone back with an embossing pen and tried to figure out how to make that look like it was part of the hello. It wouldn't have been too hard to do that, but it just felt like that was not going to be very fun for me. So I decided to just leave it broken like this. It's okay. It doesn't look too bad. I think it looks quite cute, actually. Hello, you. So I just added some of that liquid glue to the mouse to keep him in place. He wasn't quite stuck down well enough with the glue pen. And then with the little sheep, I just put dimensional adhesives on the top of him, and then I used regular non-dimensional adhesive for his legs so that he can peek out from the grass. And then I just placed the barn in place. And I really like how that looks. I think that it's balanced this way with the basically the little piece of fence balances off with the weight of the barn over on the other side. And then the little sheep in the center, he looks so cute. He fills up some of the empty space between the fence and the barn. And I used white embossing powder for the Hello You because I have this thing. So I'm just taking, I'll get back to that idea in a second. I'm just taking one of my personalized stamps. I got this from an Etsy store called Stamp Out Online. And I don't know if they still exist. It was many, many years ago. I have a little circle punch that I know it fits. It's my yellow Marvy circle punch. And then I have a Stampin' Up scallop circle punch that also matches with that. And so I punched the same olive green paper and the same pool party paper from Stampin' Up for my back piece. And now I wanted to put a little mat on the inside of this, but I accidentally cut it to 4 1/4 instead of 5 1/4. So it's a rectangle instead of a square, and that's not really what I wanted. That's that free paper that Lawn Fawn sent me with they always send you a couple little squares of free paper. And so I went into my Stampin' Up! Stash and I got the Pool Party patterned paper. It comes in a set. It's a designer pack or something. And so I'm just cutting it to slightly less than 5¼ by 5¼ so that my whole inside of that card will be lined with it. I do that because that card base is made out of American Crafts cardstock and it doesn't hold its shape the best. So I always try to line it with lots of different layers so that it will hold up and be like stand straight instead of kind of curving and becoming wobbly. So this, even though it's just paper, once I add a couple of layers of it, it'll hold up the back part of this and make it just as stiff as the front part is. Here it looks like I hadn't glued that down, so I'm just adding a little bit of glue and then I'm taking a little toothpick and wiping it around so it doesn't ooze out. And there's my card all done. So back to, I'm going to decorate the envelope now. I decided to use the white embossed Hello You sentiment because it kind of picks up on the white halo that's around all of the elements on the card. I like to use white embossing powder whenever I use these die cut pieces that have the little white halo around them. It just makes it seem, I don't know, it just ties in a little bit with that. So I have this Handmade with Love stamp set. It's from the Just For You set from Lawn Fawn, and there is a die that coordinates with it, but I just stamped it right on the back, right on the flap of the envelope, and then I took my Stampin' Up! Real Red Stampin' marker, and I colored in the hearts, and then I just took my Wink of Stella, and I'm coloring some glitter all over his wool, just to give him a little bit of glitter. You can't really see it. It doesn't make that big of an impact, actually, but I decided to go ahead and do it because I have some Wink of Stella, so I might as well use them. Now I'm going to color the little hearts on my little logo thing. It's not really a logo, but my little personalized stamp, and that looks quite dark. I actually wish I had done pink or something because it would look a little bit nicer, but that's okay. And I'm liking how that looks. I do have to trim off those two little extra bits of the stamp that are of the fence that are sticking out a little bit. And I have this awesome stamp set from the Sweet Stamp Shop, and it is it's called Great, Another Cheesy Card. It's just a little tiny one called Cheesy Card, and I'm looking for it, and at this point there's just so much on my desk I kind of can't find it, but there I trimmed off the edge of the fence, and now I'm just gonna go and grab that stamp set. There it is. It's with another stamp set from the Sweet Stamp Shop. And I haven't used it yet, but I've been wanting to put it in the corner of an envelope for quite some time. So I went ahead and mounted it on a block because I couldn't find my other block. I was like, really, my desk is a mess. I just selectively inked it with not Old Spice, but pumpkin spice. Old Spice is a cologne with pumpkin spice ink, and then I selectively stamped the sentiment with black and just added it to the corner. And so here are some close-ups of this card. I really like how it turned out. It's really cute. Oh my. And this landscape is really spectacular. I just love how these dies work together, and yeah, I'm loving making cards. I think you're gonna see some more cards from me lately, and I promise I'll use something other than the U. I'll come up with another pun for my next card. Thanks so much for watching, and have a really great scrappy week.